Welcome all to the U.S. Department of Energy, SBIR, STTR program's first live webinar. My name is Christopher O'Gwin, and I am moderating today's meeting. Today's presenter is Dr. Manny Oliver. Manny has been the DOE SBIR STTR Programs Director since December 2010, and since his arrival, he's implemented several notable changes to these programs at DOE, and as such, he will address some of these in his presentation. Now, today's presentation is divided into 4 areas. So essentially just keep this in mind as Manny is going through his presentation. He's going to give you a brief overview of the federal SBIR STTR programs, an overview of the Department of Energy's SBIR and STTR programs, and as time permits, he will give you some example success stories to think about. Following that will be some contact information, and we will close out with some Q&A. As we have close to 300 plus participants logged in today, we will only be taking questions via the on-screen chat box down there on the left-hand side of your screen. So as Manny progresses through his presentation, please submit any questions you may have for him via this chat box, and I will group and present these to Manny following his talk. Again, welcome to our webinar, and I present to you your speaker, Dr. Manny Oliver.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone for dialing in. And again, this is the first in our series of webinars. We hope to, reach out to small businesses to provide information about our programs. And so I think we'll have to learn over time how we want to tune these and to the right information that you want. I think a lot of you submitted questions in advance, and hopefully, some fraction of those questions will be addressed in this general presentation that I'm going to give. But we do have, some different audiences, some people who are completely new to the program and some people who have some limited experience. So we're going to try to, provide, some information here that is still useful to the new folks and hopefully some details that are also useful to those who've applied in the past. So let me go ahead and start. As Chris mentioned, I'm going to talk first about just an overview of all the federal programs. The DOE is just one of many agencies that participate. Just give you a broad overview so you have some background, and we'll help you understand how the programs work. The programs were actually created initially starting in 1982, and if you're wondering what they were created for, here are the 4 reasons that are in the original charter for the program. Some rather obvious in terms of stimulating technical innovation and using small businesses to meet federal R&D needs. One of the purposes of the program is to encourage participation by socially and economically disadvantaged businesses as well as women-owned businesses. And again, another emphasis is on commercializing the R&D that was been federally funded. I would say over time, since the program was created, there's been a greater emphasis on the commercialization aspects. The Phase 1 and Phase 2 proposals that you submit, we have to evaluate the commercial potential, even early on in Phase 1. And so I view, the program that we have is really sort of comparable to angel investors in the private sector. So we're providing that initial seed funding to help you move an idea into a prototype phase so that you can move on from there with, commercialization through many routes, including potentially getting money from VCs or venture capital. One of the things that's different about, federal programs is that we have, missions for our agency, and generally we're willing to accept, greater risk to achieve those missions. So, for example, we'll take a higher risk, technology bet, or we will also be willing to invest on technology that's a little further out. In terms of the administration and funding, sometimes you'll hear us refer to the SBA or Small Business Administration. They actually run the entire program through all the federal agencies. They put out something called a policy directive, which is basically the rules for running the program. And in terms of how these 2 programs work, the SBIR program, which is the larger of the 2, basically every agency that has an extramural R&D budget in excess of $100 million sets aside 2.5% of that money just for SBIR awards. Again, this program started in '83, and there are currently 11 agencies that participate. Sorry for the, acronyms, but I think many of you are familiar with these agencies. The STTR program is different, primarily in that it requires you to collaborate with a nonprofit research institution, either a university or a national lab, typically. And there's a smaller amount of money that's set aside to fund these awards. And this was a more recent program, started in '94, and there are only 5 agencies that participate in STTR. DOE participates in both of the programs. And here we show basically where all the money is. Overall, it's a fairly large program. There's about $2.5 billion that are awarded every year. And you can see DOD is slightly over half the program. NIH is about a third. And then we have National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, and NASA as being the next sort of second-tier players in this group, which have comparable budgets. All of the remaining 6 programs are relatively small compared to the top 5 programs. But if you're wondering, where the money is, and if you're interested in SBIR, again, there are a number of agencies that participate in the program. On the next slide, we talk about eligibility. So the program is designed for-profit small businesses. You need to be at least 51% U.S. owned. And the definition of a small business, as defined by the Small Business Administration, is that you have 500 or fewer employees. This is a domestic R&D program, so it's all the work, in addition to the location of the company, has to be in the United States. The principal investigator for the SBIR program must be primarily employed with the small business. You can't have PIs that are coming to you as a consultant, or part-time on the position. For STTR, the PI may come from the small business, or they may come from the research institution, either the national lab or university that you're working with. One of the things we get a lot of questions about is the cost sharing. So one of the very unique features of the SBIR program is that no cost sharing is required. That means both for the small business, or even if you have a subcontract to a large company or another group, there's no cost sharing required throughout the. And in addition, cost sharing is not used as a criterion for evaluation. So somebody who does, provide cost sharing cannot be rated higher just because they provide that. In terms of the way the funding is done, there are 3 phases to the program. Phase 1 is typically a feasibility study of some sort, can be experimental or theoretical. Across the agencies, it can extend typically anywhere from 6 to 12 months, and with a maximum amount, usually up to $150,000. Phase 2 is typically up to 2 years and up to $1 million. And the thing I noted here is that the percentages I mentioned before, the 2.5% and the 0.3%, can only be used for Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 3 refers to commercialization, and that's typically funded by the private sector, or can be funded by a federal agency when you're finished with your Phase 2. So you may move on to a separate award, not necessarily put out through an SBIR solicitation. I'll just say a little bit about the reauthorization, particularly since there's been news even of the last night. So for those not familiar with the program, for the last 3 years, these 2 programs have operated under a series of continuing resolutions, anywhere from 3 to 6 months. So there's been some question about the longevity of the program. Just this week, and appears to have been significant steps in the House and Senate reaching agreement on reauthorization. This is actually part of a National Defense Authorization Act. We don't know that many details yet, but it appears that the program would be reauthorized for 6 years. For those of you wondering how long the program might still be around, so this will give you some, security knowing that the program should be around that long. So if you get a Phase 1, we'll still be here for the Phase 2. And then also the other thing that's in there is actually an increase in the allocations in both SBIR and STTR. So Congress has made it a priority to raise those percentages. So the funding from any given agency over time, should go up. Now, this does depend, because these are percentages of an agency's funding. It does depend on how much funding the agency gets. For those of you who would like to know an exact forecast of our funding, we just can't provide that. So each agency receives its funding, only a year at a time. So we can't really forecast out what our funding will be 2, 3, 4 years from now. And in fact, in most years, just like this year, we don't actually know what our funding yet is for fiscal year 12, which began October 1st. So that hopefully will also get decided by the end of the week. So let me talk specifically about now the rest of the presentation will be focused mainly on just on the DOE programs. And there is flexibility in the programs. The programs were set up so that each agency can use them to best fit its missions. To say a little bit about what the Department of Energy does, I think a lot of people have some, vague notion of what we do, but I just want to make it sort of clear. We do have three goals that we work on that are relatively independent, and we're kind of organized around these three goals. So the first one, and I think the one that most of people are familiar with, is really our work in clean energy. The transforming the U.S. Energy economy to one that's more reliant on renewable energies and other clean technologies. And so that is a significant part of our mission, although not really the largest part of our funding. The second goal is really that and particularly the Office of Science in the Department of Energy, is responsible for providing leadership in science and engineering. Although you may usually think of an organization like the National Science Foundation for taking care of that, the Department of Energy is actually the largest funder of physical science research in the world. So we have a very significant effort here, and about actually 2/3 of our extramural R&D actually comes through the Office of Science. And the third goal, some people may not be familiar with, is actually the Department of Energy actually builds all the nuclear weapons for the United States. We actually build them and deliver them to the Department of Defense. And associated with that mission, we also have responsibility for non-proliferation of nuclear materials and weapons, and also the cleanup of nuclear weapon sites that have been contaminated over the years. So those are our three main goals that we work on, and that's reflected in the way the Department of Energy is organized. So we have an Office of the Undersecretary of Energy, and these are all the sort of the green or clean energy programs. We have an Office of Science, and again, there's 6 programs. And I'm highlighting here in the different colors all the offices, program offices within the Office of the Department of Energy that participate in the SBIR program. So there are 4 under the Undersecretary of Energy. There are 6 under the Undersecretary of Science. I would also point out that our office, which is separate from these program offices, also sits in the Office of Science. And finally, there are 2 programs, Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation and the Environmental Management, which does the cleanup, that is part of the National Nuclear Security Administration. And again, this group of 12 programs all participate in SBIR and STTR. In terms of how the program works, it's important to understand that the STTR Programs Office is the one that you will see more of, and you'll be using our website, because we're the one that actually issue the topics, we issue the funding opportunity announcements, we're responsible for running the review and selection process for the awards, and then we would work with our Chicago office to issue your grants. And we have other responsibilities to SBA, as well as conducting outreach like this webinar to make sure people are aware of the program. The program offices, however, take responsibility for developing the topics. We get a lot of questions about topics and where they come from, and these are developed by program managers that sit in the 12 offices that I mentioned. So they have responsibility not only for SBIR awards in their office. They're also spending the other 97% of the funds on with large companies, universities, and national labs. So and they are looking out across sort of the R&D landscape in their area. For example, it might be biofuels, and trying to determine what are the critical roadblocks that need additional funding for R&D, and they usually will develop topics around what they feel are the these critical areas. They're also responsible for identifying reviewers for the proposals that come in, and then in ranking and selecting awardees. If you are given a grant and award, then the project manager for your award will also come from these program offices. And then they will also sign off on your technical reports, and if you move on to Phase 2, your continuation applications. Since one of the things I want to emphasize is because our program offices are the ones responsible for developing topics, and if you really want to get to know your field and what's going on, I strongly encourage you to go to the websites for the individual program offices. So when you find a topic, and here I'm showing, for example, the website for energy efficiency and renewable energy, if that's one of the topics you want to apply to, I would encourage you to look at their website. Here again, they will have separate programs for each of the energy efficiency and renewable energy areas. And if you want to find out what's going on in solar, what's the state-of-the-art performance, for the large companies, universities that we fund, what's the latest results of their research, that will all be typically on these websites. So this is a very effective way for you to come up to speed, so you know what the state-of-the-art is, so that when you submit your proposal, you can often cite what's going on, so that you can clearly distinguish the work that you are proposing relative to what's going on. There will also be some contact information for the program managers there, so that you can also talk to a person about the particular area. In addition to SBIR, they will have non-SBIR funding announcements that you can also apply to. So let me just go through these program offices and the three different areas centered around these goals. So as I mentioned, there are four that focus on clean energy technologies. One is the Office of Electricity Delivery and Energy Reliability. Again, you can think of them as the electric grid and the smart grid that we're working towards. So they typically fund activities related to the smart grid in terms of moving information around, and also related to energy storage on the grid. But this will be large-scale energy storage like flow batteries, and would extend to include things such as flywheels. Probably our most popular program for SBIR is energy efficiency and renewable energy. So they look at making homes, buildings more efficient through heating systems as well as energy solid-state lighting, and then the renewable energy, of course, wind, solar, biomass, and the rest. Fossil energy, again, focused on coal, gas, oil, and a lot of their focus these days is on how do we make those those resources cleaner, in terms of both the extraction as well as the conversion of those to energy. And finally, the nuclear energy is focused on nuclear energy, a lot of work on small modular reactors these days, and they're typically using SBIR to do things that small companies can do. We're not looking for them to design new reactor systems from scratch, but typically work on new materials or sensor systems that can withstand high radiation environments. So here are some examples of topics that will be issued by, again, these will be more the fossil energy topics, nuclear, smart grid, and again, energy efficiency and renewable energy. The Office of Science, as I mentioned, about 2/3 of the funding for SBIR comes through the Office of Science. They do a very broad range of research, extending from computing. This is very high-performance computing. Most of the very fast computers in our country are funded by our Advanced Scientific Computing Group. They also do high-performance networking. Our Basic Energy Science funds primarily physics, chemistry, and materials research, and also funds a lot of the national user facilities for doing X-ray, neutron, and electron scattering type facilities for people to do fundamental work in understanding the nature of materials. Our Biological Environmental Research Group does both biology. They do sort of the genomic basis for looking at biofuels, and on the environmental side do climate research, as well as environmental research related to cleanup of the environment. Again, the last three programs are all really focused on physics at the nuclear or elementary particle scale, and have a lot of their topics are really focused on building accelerators or fusion reactors for those applications. And again, on the next slide, it shows the broad range of topics that would typically be funded by our Office of Science. And finally, under nuclear security, we have two offices: Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation, Environmental Management. Both, the first looking at detecting, legal transport of nuclear materials or weapons, and the second with cleaning up and decontaminating former weapons sites. And again, here are examples of some of the topics that would be funded there. And what I've showed you so far is actually just kind of the high-level description of our topics. When the Department of Energy issues topics, they're usually fairly detailed documents. Again, our Phase 1, which was focused on the science, that is already closed. That applications were due in September. Our Release 2 is now open, and in fact, those topics were issued on November 1st, and our funding opportunity announcement was just released on the 28th. And these will be very detailed descriptions. I think on the next page, I have an example of, well, actually, these are all the topics in Release 2. So these are the ones that are currently open. And again, these will be cover both the nuclear topics as well as the clean energy topics. Sometimes we get a lot of questions about, well, how many awards are made per topic or per subtopic. And unfortunately, there's no general rule for that. In some programs, we'll put out, many topics, some of them very high risk, for which they only get a few applications. For example, this year, energy efficiency and renewable energy only submitted 2 topics. They have many subtopics under there in each of those categories, so they will probably fund, maybe a dozen or more awards under each of these topics. So there's no simple rule sort of guiding awards per topic. Here's an example topic. I just want to go through this quickly. This is actually one of our shorter ones. A typical topic might be 2 pages long. And the reason for that is we are trying to define as clearly as possible what we think the opportunity is that you would address. So here we have a topic number, and then we'd have subtopics. This one only has 2, A and B. I throw some green blobs on the presentations, and that's just some hints or tips for submitting your applications and you go through this. So just to be clear that when we take applications, you have to specify both the subtopic, in this case 6A, and subtopic, both in your letter of intent and your application. We don't really try to match your proposal to one of the topics in our solicitation. And the other thing I would one thing I would point out is that we also have an other subtopic. We get a lot of questions about that. And what we do generally is try to be fairly specific about what we think the roadblocks are and where we need innovation for the program managers that understand their fields. And then the other is really to provide you with an opportunity to look at the topic. If you have some ideas that are not covered by the specific subtopic, then you can submit them here. Now, the thing I would say, this can't just be anything. It really has to fit within, for example, the topic and the topic description up above. It just can't be any energy idea. And as we noted here, actually 9% of our awards that were made last year came under other. We've had a lot of small companies come in and say, well, I assume you're not really awarding anything there since you have some specific subtopics where you're really looking for innovation. So we do get a lot of, sort of out-of-the-box ideas that come through other. And they do get funded. Now, last year was the first year. I don't know year to year how this will vary, but we did have some good success with this last year. The other thing I would point out is that in a topic you'll see references. So our program managers are trying to make you aware of what is the state of the art in the field and provide you with some references in case you're not, to understand what's been done. The other key thing I would point out is the DOE program manager contact information. A lot of people ask us, well, I have this idea, but I'm not really sure if it fits. Well, this is the reason we put the contact information in. This is the person you contact to say, hey, if I have an idea that falls under this subtopic, send them an email. I would caution that our DOE program managers are busy people. You may have to, ping them a couple times to get a response. But they're generally, we'll get back to you and let you give some indication of whether that is something they see that fits in this specific subtopic or is, compatible with other. Now, part of the reason we issue our topics before we issue our funding opportunity announcements is to allow you this sort of free an open information exchange with DOE program managers. Once the funding opportunity is issued, then you have to use a system called FedConnect to connect with the program manager. And that's really related to government regulations that want the competition to be free and open. So when you're using FedConnect, if you ask a program manager a question, then anybody can see the answer. So that's the intent of that. So this is fairly important. Take the time, look through, find a topic. Then if you have any questions about it, again, our office is more administrative. If you have a technical question, you really need to go to the DOE program managers. I'll talk a little more about, again, SBIR and TTR and some of the differences. Unlike a lot of agencies, actually DOE uses the same topics for SBIR and STTR. So you can, look at a topic and decide you want to submit an SBIR and STTR. Most other agencies have separate solicitations for SBIR and STTR. And we actually allow you to apply, to both. But one thing you have to be careful about is you have to meet the requirements for both SBIR and STTR if you want to submit one that, to both. And so here are the requirements, and these are level of effort requirements. So for SBIR, for example, in a phase 1, we do expect the small company to do about 2/3 of the work. This is a requirement. And under phase 2, at least half the work. So this again means you can subcontract and work with large companies, universities, as well when you're working on your awards. And for STTR, because this program was set up to collaborate with a nonprofit research institution, again, the small business has to do at least 40% and the research institution 30%. A lot of small businesses get confused on what we mean by the level of effort. We encourage you to use a level of effort worksheet that we have on our webpage. It allows you to type in your budget numbers and actually will tell you whether you meet those requirements or not. And just another word on collaborating with research institutions. For STTR, since you'll be working with a national lab or university, we do require that you have an agreement in place that covers your intellectual property and commercialization rights. And unfortunately, that is a requirement of the program. We cannot make an award if such an agreement is not in place. And this should be simplified, the negotiation of the agreement, in case you're a small business and don't have one of these agreements on hand, we have a model agreement on our website you can use as a starting point. For SBIR, one of the odd things about the program is that if you do have a subcontract with the national lab on your SBIR, and this only applies to SBIR, we do have to get a waiver from SBA, the Small Business Administration. And in that, you have to note that the national lab must provide a very unique resource that is not available from the private sector. So for SBIR, we don't want you teaming with the national lab if you're just using, their electron microscopes, which you could get from somebody else. It really has to be some unique capability that's provided by the lab. Again, for our programs, here are the actual phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We do use the maximum award amounts for both SBIR and STTR. Our phase 1s are 9 months, and phase 2s are 2 years. Sorry. The only thing I want to point out with phase 3, again, that can come from DOE or other agencies or the private sector, is that no competition is really required. If you do a phase 1 or phase 2 and a program really likes what you're doing and wants to fund some additional research, they don't have to issue a solicitation. They can just make a non-competitive award to you to complete the work. And this is our schedule for this fiscal year. Release 1 is already out. We're actually busy, in processing most of these applications right now. Release 2 is the one that's, open, where we posted topics and we have issued the funding opportunity announcement. Those letters of intent are due December 20th, coming up, and the full applications are due at the end of January. Again, here are the preliminary dates for when you would be notified that you received an award. This would be early May, and then the grant would start in late June. And again, I would point out that we post all these dates on our website, so both for the existing awards, closed solicitations, and also future solicitations if you want to check our website. And here are some important documents for first-time applicants just to be aware of. I think we've already talked about our topic descriptions. So that's really the starting point. If you really can't find some topics that are a good match, then you probably don't need to go any further. Second document is our funding opportunity announcement or solicitation. And it's here that the funding, this is kind of it's kind of a somewhat lengthy document that basically has the rules of the solicitation. So it tells you, what's required in your letter of intent, what's required in your, your application, what are the, award and selection criteria. So it's a very important document. Tells you what to do. Some people don't read it just because it looks a little too lengthy and detailed. But really, all the important information that you want is there. Again, this is the grant application package. So this is a large PDF form. It's actually kind of a form that has many sort of subforms in it. This you download from grants.gov and fill out. And it's relatively self-explanatory, but if you need help, we also have instructions basically for filling out this grant application. And again, these instructions are on the DOE website. So again, most of these three documents here you can find on our website. It's only the grant application package that has to be downloaded from grants.gov. And I should remind me to tell you that DOE only issues grants for our SBIR awards. Many other agencies use contracts. There is a difference. Generally, grants are more, I think, favorable and less onerous in terms of the reporting requirements and such than contracts. Letters of intent is something we started new this year, and just wanted to, highlight, why we're doing it. Actually, the primary reason is so that we can start identifying reviewers to process your proposal when it comes in, and so to reduce our cycle time. So we're trying to get our cycle time, knock almost 2 months off our cycle time for phase 1 this year. And part of the reason is using letters of intent. It's not a complicated document. We just need a title, again, topic and subtopic, and a very short abstract. Again, the purpose of the abstract is to help us assign reviewers. So we get questions about what needs to be in there. It should be technically, deep enough so that a project manager can say, oh, here are the right people to assign to your proposal. We do ask for your collaborators. And again, that's so that we don't pick reviewers who might be from a collaborating institution. And then just some basic information about your business. So again, this is a fairly short 1 to 2 page document. We provide a template on our website if you want to use that. I would tell you that we also provide, as the project managers are going through and assigning reviewers, they may come across some they feel are non-responsive, and we will provide that feedback. We will only send a letter if we feel that it's, something appears to be non-responsive. Since it's only a 500-word abstract that you're submitting, it's not a definitive assessment. We'll just indicate that it appears to be so. You can still submit the full application if you wish. But we do, in addition to, we do provide that feedback, with our letters of intent. We get a lot of questions about our budget. So this blue line actually shows how our budget has progressed over the years. It's been growing. We're currently, last year, at about $164 million. And actually for FY12, we expect the budget to be just slightly lower than FY11, so somewhere in the neighborhood of $160 million this year. You'll notice that even though our budget's been going up, actually the number of awards has been going down. And that's because actually our award size has increased. So we increased our phase 1s from 100 to 150,000, and our phase 2s from 750 to $1 million. And that's the reason unfortunately, the number of awards is actually going down. Again, another area we get a lot of questions is who evaluates my proposal and what are they evaluating it? What are the criteria? Again, there's more detail on these criteria in the funding opportunity announcement. Here's just a brief summary of the 3 different areas. Each is equally weighted in looking at your applications. One is, how good is the idea? Do you really understand what's being asked for? Do you understand the state of the art? Are you, proposing something that is a significant advance in the state of the art? We also look at basically your team. Do you have a good team to carry out this project? Do you have the right skills? Are you trying to do this all by yourself as a single investigator? Have you, reached out and gotten important collaborators where you need them? And finally, the impact, both the technical, and commercial impact. Starting this year, we do require a brief phase 1 commercialization plan, and that is very brief. It's something that could be addressed really in a page, page and a half, and you just answer 3 questions. Tell us about your market. Who's going to buy this? Tell us what you're doing about intellectual property. Is that something you've already filed patents for, you're planning to file, or maybe you're going to keep this as a trade secret? And finally, who are the people on your team who are going to address the commercialization? Do you have people who are going to be, who are doing business development, who are going to, potentially, work to license this technology or establish a joint venture? So we want to make sure that you're, again, thinking about that. And actually for our Phase 2, we actually do send out your commercialization plan for separate review. Now this will be a more substantial commercialization plan. If you look at our Phase 2 funding opportunity announcement for last year, you can see what's required for a Phase 2 commercialization plan. Typically this will be a few or several pages. And again, it's more extensive than what we required in Phase 1, but basically following the same approach. Some people have expressed concerns that, gee, since we're only doing Phase 1 and we're just kind of at the idea stage, why do we have to submit, commercialization information? One is we are required to evaluate the commercial potential, in Phase 1. And two, the National Academy of Sciences has reviewed our program. And actually the number one reason that people stop working on their innovations after their Phase 2s are completed is that they discover the market is too small. So we got about a third of our Phase 2s that are awarded, just end up not panning out because people discover really, in my mind, very late that, hey, this is not a very big market for this. So we want to make sure people are thinking about that up front and making sure there is a market. We look to small companies to provide the sort of our eyes on the commercialization potential on these awards. We don't, really, require DOE program managers, don't necessarily have that background. So you are providing that important resource, in evaluating commercial potential. In terms of who reviews your proposal, this is, again, just kind of a breakdown on, again, a lot of people, we have a lot of, 17 national labs for the Department of Energy, so we rely, heavily on reviewers from that community, as well as university and private sector and the government. We do ask every reviewer to, sign an agreement. They'll keep your information confidential and also indicate they don't have any conflict of interest in reviewing your application. And again, I think this is, again, one of the most common questions is, what are my chances? And here's a breakdown of the roughly 2,200 applications we received for Phase 1 last year. You'll see about approximately 20% are actually declined without review. And those are for applications that might be missing an important element. They didn't submit, a budget justification. It's a very short proposal that was not, substantial enough for us to review. Some people forget to submit a topic and subtopic. And there are some here that are deemed non-responsive. If we have a topic and the topic manager says, well, this is not really what was described by my topic, you will also be declined without review. Again, you can see the majority are reviewed. About half of them, are not recommended for funding. We do provide the reviews back to the applicants, after the selection process is completed, so that you can approve your proposals in the future. I would note that we don't have enough funding to award everyone that could be funded. So last year, only about 1 out of 3 that were recommended for funding were actually awarded. In our program, only for Phase 2, only Phase 1 awardees can apply. So everything gets reviewed. We find that about a third of them are not recommended for funding. And of the ones that are recommended, again, you can see about half of the applicants are awarded. In Phase 2, we're not trying to really weed a lot of people out. We do want to fund, the good ideas that have progressed from Phase 1. Again, this is our, year-to-year applicant success rates for both SBIR and STTR. Usually between 10 and 20% for Phase 1, and we try to stay right around 50% for Phase 2. And for those people who say, hey, I've never applied to SBIR at any agency or certainly not DOE, what are my chances? So here we show the percent of Phase 1 awardees who are first-time applicants. So about every year, 1 of 6 of every award we make is to somebody who's never applied to our program before. And again, above that, first-time winners, another group of 1 out of 6 who've applied before but haven't won. So unfortunately, that means there are about two-thirds of the awards do go to people or applicants who have applied before. That's a function of the very large number of awards we've made in the past. So there are a lot of small businesses who have received awards who do come back to the program to apply again. And I'll just mention commercialization assistance. I'll be brief here because we're actually just in the middle of changing over the commercial assistance we provide. But basically, Just note that if you are a Phase 1 awardee, we will provide assistance to you at no charge from a contractor to help you with your commercialization. So, for example, to help you develop your Phase 2 commercialization plan if that's something you need help with. About half of our Phase 1 awardees used this assistance last year. Phase 2 is a little different. You actually, we can't provide you essentially no charge. You basically have to budget for it and work with somebody to, basically to get them to agree to provide that assistance, but you need to provide that in your budget for your Phase 2 award. And again, we'll have a new program in place by February, and we'll have more updates on that at that time. In the interest of time, and so we did want to really focus on your questions today, I'm going to kind of skip through and not do our success stories, but here are just quickly some examples of companies that have used the program very effectively to help them develop their technology. I'll just get to our contact information here at the end. One is our website. A lot of information here. Also a place for you to join our mailing list. I'll maybe talk on that briefly. For those of you who are very new and maybe need some more one-on-one assistance, you can email us and you can phone us as well to get that help. Again, depending on where we are in the selection of awards that we're processing, we'll have some bandwidth, but not infinite bandwidth to guide you through the process. But we will try to do our best to help you. And again, here's our website for the commercialization program if you're interested in that. I will just take a couple of minutes just to make you aware of, here's our website. And right at the bottom of the front page is our, join here to get our mailing list. Some of you want to know, how do I know when your new topics come out, and how do I know when you have a new solicitation? If you join our mailing list, you'll always be notified. Here's our current topics for Release 2 right here. You can just click on that and open that up. And then the other important tab is this, funding opportunities. That's what most people are interested in. And on that page, you can see, when you click on that, our open announcements. So this is Release 2 that's currently open. You'll see our topics there and our funding opportunity announcement. And we'll tell you about our future announcements, when the dates and when they'll be open. And then all, the instructions and other forms that I mentioned during my talk, you can find them here under Application Resources. And one other website I just want to mention to you is SBIR.gov. This is the site by the Small Business Administration, covers all the SBIR programs throughout the federal government. Again, a good resource for general information about the program. If you're brand new to SBIR, this will tell you about the program, not from a DOE perspective, but from the whole federal government. And one very important thing is the solicitations tab here. So if you click on that, that web page will list basically all the open solicitations through the federal government on SBIR. And right at the top here, you can do a search. So you can type in keywords for your technology, and it will search through all these open solicitations and identify which solicitations might apply to you. So again, that's all I had on just the websites. And I think we'll stop here and just open it up for questions. Before we do that, I would mention that our office can handle most of the questions just in terms of how the program's run and administering it. If you have a technical question about your particular idea and does it match with a particular topic, that's something you're going to have to take up with, as I mentioned before, with the DOE program manager, and you'll have to use our topics document to identify the contact information for that DOE program manager. Okay, so I'll stop there and open up for questions. I think Chris has been collecting questions as we're going along and may end up fielding those on your behalf.
Yes, Manny, Oliver, thank you very much. I have been collecting quite a few questions. And before I jump into that, let me answer some of the most frequently asked questions, which will the slides be available? Will they be sent to us? Will they be available on your website? Yes, the slides, we will make those available. As soon as this presentation is over, we'll start taking steps to get these slides up on our website on the home page. Most of the information that Manny was discussing in regards to the letter of intent can be found on page 13 of the current funding opportunity announcement, which can also be found still currently on our web page or by going to fedconnect.gov. And the webinar, this actual recorded webinar, will also be made available, but that will take a few more days to get that up onto our website, but the slides will be made available. Okay, Manny, some of the questions we had here dealt with the process, some dealt with specific topics and technologies, and so I'm going to go ahead and try to give you a smattering of these groups here. Several folks wanted to know who makes funding decisions on awards. Who ultimately is making those decisions?
The funding decisions are made by, again, by DOE program managers. As I indicated at the beginning of my talk here, let me see if I can zip through the beginning of my slides here. On this slide, hopefully you can see this slide where I mentioned at the beginning, how we collaborate with DOE program offices. So even though we administer the review and selection process, we will contact reviewers, get their reviews, provide scoring sheets to DOE program managers, but then it would go really over to them to read the reviews, score each proposal, and then rank them. And then based on their ranking and their available funding, that will determine which ones get awarded.
Thank you. Can an applicant submit to more than one topic in one solicitation?
Yeah, Chris, I think somebody did make a note online, and I'm having a hard time hearing you as well.
Okay,
can you repeat the last question?
Sure. Let me move a little closer. Can you hear me a little better here? Can an applicant submit to more than one topic in one funding solicitation?
Can they submit more than one proposal?
More than one proposal. Can they submit more than one proposal to a topic? To more than one?
Yeah, if you have a fundamentally different approach that you're proposing for the topic. So, what we don't like to see is actually submitting the same proposal to multiple topics. You should tune the proposal to the specific topic. And if you have two very different ideas for solving, a problem, you can submit an additional proposal.
Okay. Can you comment on the success rate of the other subtopic?
Yeah, I mentioned that we funded about 9% of the awards last year out of the other, and about 16% of the applications came in under the other. And so the overall success rate, as I mentioned, for the total programs last year was about 10%. And since their awards to application was, not the same, so I would, I guess, estimate their success rate is below 10%, since, I'm guessing it would be in the range of 7 or 8% for those. The thing I should mention, I'm giving you overall numbers. A lot will depend on, the specific topic that you submit to. I mean, some topics will have large numbers of applications, and your success rate may only be at the 2 or 3% level. Some topics may get very few proposals, and your success rate may be at the 1 and 3 level. So we provide the aggregate numbers, but a lot will depend on the specific topic that you submit to.
Okay. Is there a funding gap between Phase 1 and Phase 2?
Yeah, that's a good question. So typically you don't submit your Phase 2 proposal until you complete your Phase 1 work, and there will be a funding gap of approximately 4 months before Phase 2. Many other agencies have what's called a fast-track approach, and that's something we're looking at to implement in not this fiscal year, but in FY13.
Good. How does DOE SBIR treat an applicant's proprietary information?
Yeah, that's another good question. Again, throughout the whole federal government, we are required to protect your proprietary information. And again, for the purposes of proposal evaluation, we do have to have non-government employees evaluate it. So they are signing, non-disclosure agreements and conflict of interest agreements associated with reviewing those proposals. And actually, both your proposal and your, the reports that you submit upon doing the work are also required to be protected. So we protect those for a period of 4 years, after you have submitted your last report. So, for example, if you get a Phase 1, then a Phase 2, we wait until after the 4 years after your Phase 2 before we would release those. Again, we generally don't post them on a publicly accessible website at that point, somebody would have to request the proposal or request your final report to receive it.
Okay. Can you please address the selection process for technical and commercialization reviewers?
Sorry, could you just repeat the first part of the question again?
Could you please address the selection process? How do you select your technical and commercialization reviewers for proposals?
Again, the technical reviewers are assigned by the DOE program managers. So they're basically looking for people who are technically qualified based on the content of your proposal. Again, they will use their networks. Again, most of them have been doing this for a number of years. So they have networks of people they know. And again, depending on the program, whether it's in national labs, universities, or the private sector. In the commercialization side, we are currently using external, essentially contractors to do the commercial potential reviews. So these are typically consultants who are, reviewing primarily the commercialization plan. So they're not really reviewing your whole technical proposal, but just looking at the commercialization plan. And those we work with outside companies to select companies. They normally require a broad network of consultants to be able to review the proposals that we get through DOE. We have also used some of the tech transfer personnel at DOE National Labs who have commercialization backgrounds as well to review the commercialization plans.
If a company doesn't have a technology that meets any of the topics or subtopics, what options are available to us?
That is a challenge. When I started at DOE a year ago, that was one of my first questions. It seems that we are very focused. We believe we know what the critical problems are and the breakthroughs that we're looking for. But it does not necessarily mean that there are probably some very good ideas that we might be missing. The challenge with having something that looks like an other topic in our solicitations has been handling the volume and the breadth of the things that would come in. If something comes in, we have to review it, and so we need to make sure we're lined up to handle that volume. The one example that I could give is when a new group in DOE was formed called ARPA-E. They did, issue a call for, send us any of your great energy ideas. And they got 3,000 proposals in. And they were just overwhelmed. They just couldn't handle that and certainly not review them all in a timely fashion. So their operating model, again, has changed to, focus on more narrow opportunities where we are able to, review the proposals. Even with our narrow, solicitations these days, we can still only handle, we still get 2,000 proposals in every year. So unfortunately, we have not discovered a mechanism on how to handle that. I would say that the Department of Energy as a whole does have a unsolicited proposal site. So if you just Google DOE unsolicited proposal, it will take you to a website at DOE that will indicate where you can submit an unsolicited proposal. It's not a SBIR unsolicited proposal. It's just open to anybody in DOE.
Thank you. Can you subcontract out a non-SBC? Can you subcontract out to a non-SBC or a larger company or to a foreign university?
You can subcontract out really to any party. There's no restriction on the party, so they can be a large company, a university, national lab. The only restriction is that all of the work for SBIR, this is a domestic program, must be done in the United States. So the work must be performed here.
Okay. Is it necessary to meet the topic managers? If so, how do we do this?
No, it's not required that you meet a topic manager before submitting, either your letter of intent or your proposal. Again, we currently don't have any forum for that type of situation. It really requires a one-on-one initiative by the applicant to reach out to the program managers. And again, that's why we have placed their contact information within the topics.
Okay. Regarding letter of intent, is this acknowledged prior to the grant application submission? Can you address one more time, Manny, what the feedback might be regarding a letter of intent?
Yeah, and again, as I mentioned, the primary purpose is for us to assign reviewers. As a program manager is reviewing the letter of intent and trying to identify a reviewer, they may come across something that appears to be non-responsive, and it's only those people who appear not to be a match for the topic and subtopic who will get a letter indicating that, and again, it appears to be non-responsive. Because there's only a 500-word abstract, it's not a definitive assessment. You're still free to submit the full application, but we do want to give you some initial feedback in case you were, worried that it didn't really fit, and you would get some confirmation of that to prevent you from filling out a full proposal when it was kind of questionable.
Okay. What is the prime goal of the Department of Energy when choosing an application for award? Does that tie into the mission of the department or the programs?
Right. So the mission, I think, is a fundamental requirement. If you submit something that doesn't tie to our mission, it can be declined without review. I mean, it may be a good idea, a good technical idea, but it doesn't fit with the Department of Energy's mission. It won't fit there. In terms of why we select particular proposals for review, and again, that was something we covered in terms of the selection and evaluation criteria. Let me see if I can find that slide real quickly. So again, here were the technical merit review, the three things we look for, and to supplement that in phase 2, we look at the commercialization plan. So in terms of the details of the selection and the scoring, it's all based on these parameters. And I would say these three parameters here are equally weighted.
Okay, and I think we have time for one or two more questions here, Manny. Why the new limit on phase 1 proposals? Why are you limiting these applications to 10 per small business now, per solicitation?
Again, that limit is really just to prevent small, especially startup companies from getting crowded out. Startup companies are typically only submitting, one, maybe two proposals. Unfortunately, we've had some very experienced companies who are familiar with DOE programs submit as many as 40 to 50 proposals, per solicitation. And it is somewhat of a numbers game. The more you submit, as long as they're quality proposals, the more awards you'll get. We don't want larger and more experienced companies crowding out, some of the smaller applicants. Let me just add another thing with regard to, the startup companies. One thing I want to point out is that, the program is set up to enable people who are just thinking of starting a company and using, an SBIR award as the basis for starting their company to do so. So you may be employed, somewhere else now at a university, at a large company, and said, well, gee, if I got this SBIR award, I would like to, start a company. And you can submit an application based on that. So when you submit the application, the personnel and stuff are really based on what your budget should be based on, the situation at the time of award. You will have about 6 weeks to 2 months between the time you're notified that you get an award and the time that you would start your grant. So that would be time for you to really pull things together and start your company. So there certainly have been, even among our success stories, that's how companies get started, but they may not have been a small company, at the time they were reviewing the topics and, submitted their application.
Okay. Last question, Manny. I think it's fairly short. Are co-principal investigators allowed on an award? No. We only allow a single principal investigator for each program. And again, we take that fairly seriously because they are, the person who is driving the R&D. In fact, you do need approval from DOE even to switch your principal investigator. That is not, automatically approved. And so, I see a lot of questions, flying by here, and I apologize just because of the large number of people who attended today that we were not able to answer all your questions. And as I mentioned, I'll go back to our contact slide. If you do have, questions perhaps we didn't get to today,
you can submit them directly by email here. This will come to our office, and we'll forward that to the best person in our office to answer that question. And you can also phone us. Like I said, just depending on how busy we are, we may or may not be able to get to answer your call, but we should be able to answer your email in short order.
Okay. Well, very good. Thank you very much, Manny. And please stay tuned. This is our first live webinar, and we intend to do several more of these. We have in the works a nuts and bolts, one that will discuss the ins and outs for applying to an SBIR award. That will not be coming out for some time, though. But if you get onto our mailing list by submitting it to the email address that you see here on the contact information, we will be happy to put you on that list, and we'll notify you when these webinars are being made available or being broadcasted. So this concludes our first webinar. Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you all have a good day. Thank you, and take care.
Okay, thank you, everybody.